Yo, what's going on, everybody? So today, kind of switching up a little bit. Actually, today is gonna be about the comedian Andrew Schultz or Schultz. But first off, I just want to say I don't hate Andrew Schultz. I've listened or watched his, YouTube, podcast or whatnot, Flagrant with a Akosh and everybody and everything, and it's relatively entertaining. For the most part, I used to watch it. Just like I used to watch Joe Rogan. I have not watched Joe Rogan probably in years. Um, Flagrant for the most part, I don't really watch that much myself either anymore, too much. But I'm not saying that it's bad or anything. But I just want to start this off by saying that I don't dislike Andrew, um, but he's an interesting person. He's just very interesting, right? And I don't even know how to begin this. But when people have criticisms of Andrew Schultz, they're typically analyzing the words he's saying without actually trying to understand him as an entire person. And the funny thing about a lot of these comedians, podcasters, what have you, is that they make a living observing everything else and getting paid from it, from the algorithm, from the demigod, which is the Google algorithm, right? But sometimes they don't understand that the observation can go the exact opposite direction back at themselves. And when you open yourselves up to these very long form discussions, you start noticing habits in people, particularly when you watch their stuff a lot. And does that mean we know these people? Does it mean you have some weird parasocial relationship with these people? I don't know. But you can kind of pick up nods, right? About, yeah, he overtalks people a little bit, or he seems to be a contrarian for the sake of being a contrarian, or he's a little headstrong, bullheaded a little bit. But we'll go more into that. So so I just want to say, don't hate Andrew Schultz. I think he's just trying to make it in America, yada yada. But Andrew reminds me of a dude who watched way too much Entourage on HBO, and he's trying to relive that life, right? I think, in other words, because he's not that much older than me. So basically, when he was a senior in high school, I would have been like a freshman or coming into high school. So we're kind of that same era demographic time frame, right? I'm a millennial, so he's probably just an older millennial. He's not Gen X, but we kind of get Gen X because we were just teens, preteens, during that whole 90s MTV era, early 2000s, yada yada, right? But he just kind of reminds me of trying to be Vinny Chase from Entourage, right? And if you watch HBO, it'll make the HBO show, it'll make a lot of sense. People who started from nothing, who kind of find themselves in the crazy world of Hollywood, and they get into their little childish fun antics, and they're so cool, and it's just like it's a bro fantasy, right? And I just would not be surprised if like Andrew was just the guy. Like many of the people I went to college with and I was in college with, we will watch Entourage, right? And I look back on it with age and just think to myself, uh, how much of kind of a childish fantasy it kind of all was, you know. But then again, there's a slight charm to that even after you realize that. So once you realize that it's a lot of just like, it's basically, I've heard it said well before, it is a male postmodern fantasy. And but once you even get over like the criticism and analysis of that, it kind of takes on this kind of endearing charm, even though you can say that there's a lot of like, quote unquote, just silliness and toxicity and unrealistic things about the show in and of itself, right? It's very endemic of a time and space that's kind of gone. So therefore it retains a certain level of charm. And even though they do some dirtbag things or whatnot and is very broy and frat boyishy or whatnot, there still is some like underlying sense of genuineness to it, right? So instead of it being like this nihilistic, postmodern, whatever, it almost kind of retains its value as some sort of like meta modern, new sincerity, kind of quirkiness to it. But I'm kind of going off on some philosophical tangent. But when it comes to Andrew, is he just seems like he's also a byproduct of what I like to say is the Drake started from the bottom, now we're here type of grinding mindset, which was essentially just a spill off of the Entourage era. So the Entourage era kind of was like basically like 2003 up until 2009, until like the recession hit, right? Kind of like the last phase of just nobody was really thinking about how capitalism worked. You just kind of lived in it or whatever, and there was a place for celebrities, and there was a place for there was all these specified roles that seemed rarefied, and everybody, not saying that everybody wanted to be that, but people cared about those things. People cared about tabloids, they cared about fame, they cared about attention or whatnot, and because it wasn't as attainable as before the social media revolution. And Entourage is very representative of that, the last era of simplified communication, rarefied authority, and this kind of elusive sense of fame before it all got democratized by social media. So, but that era, because I graduated college in 2009, right in the midst of the recession, the Great Recession when it started, right? Very interesting time to graduate from college. And the Drake era kind of started not too far after that. And what I mean by the Drake era, I think the reason why Drake talked to so many people, even though you could say he has a lot of problematic things about even him as a person, and very childish things about him as a person, is that he spoke to people who felt that they had nothing, felt that they were underperforming their value, who maybe had the only thing they had was a tight knit group of friends, mostly from college, who maybe, moved to the city to kind of figure out life, and they were going to make it. And I guarantee you that's exactly who Andrew Schulz is. And you can kind of tell that through a lot of his narration in his personal life, which kind of seems very self aggrandizing. Like he really wants people to know that he made it, right? He wants, he really wants to. He's a person who basically makes a documentary about himself. You know what I'm saying? Like nobody else is asking to make a documentary about him. He's going to make one about himself to prove to you how the grind was and all the people who he's loved in his life and all these type of things, right? And there's something very genuine about that. But you can also say if you're actually not a good person, and I'm not saying that Andrew isn't a good person, but let's just say that he's in a negative sense, right? Let's entertain the idea that he's a narcissistic person. It just kind of comes off as kind of like corny to a certain extent, or it can be. I'm not saying that's who he is. I think of course, he has love for all his family, and he talks about his father a lot and everything, and all the stuff he did with theater, and I think the news industry and all this type of stuff, and his mother and how they would dance with each other. There's a lot of love there, right? Too, but Andrew is just interesting because to summarize as I'm going is not only is he a byproduct of the Entourage generation and the early Drake started from the bottom, now we're here mentality. But actually, let me see. I was actually, man, losing my train of thought there real quick. Actually, 1 minute. Gotcha. Sorry. So not only is he a byproduct of the Entourage, era, right, and the starter from the bottom, now we're here by Drake type stuff, right. He's also, whether he realizes it or not, he's kind of engaging in manifesting. He's a manifester, right? I think he's really, and I noticed this in his body movements and his language and through all his podcasts, right? Is that he's the type of person where if you believe it, it will happen. And it almost kind of seems like self help, right? And I notice this a lot about people in our social media hyper postmodern sort of world that we live in, right? Don't you, if you go on social media, you go to Instagram, how there's always these kind of ambiguous copycat profile sites about the business mindset and the grind set and this set or whatever, right? And then you start noticing that really these are all kind of like just psychological operations to just like steer people into just like continuing to be hyper individual capitalist consumers who have like no sympathy for like their fellow working person or whatnot. And like you're in everything you do in life is in your own hands, as if like all of your success is just built in the vacuum of your own mind, basically, right? He just kind of seems, and Andrew kind of seems like a manifester. He seems like a person who's constantly looking for self reassurance and self help to bolster his success, right? It's almost kind of like how people go to church, and some of those churches are about prosperity doctrine, like the Joel Osteen type stuff, right? Kind of like, you know, God is going to make me prosperous because it just has to be, right? Or or if I believe enough, God will make me prosperous and bring me forth riches or something. And I feel like this is something that is not just an Andrew thing. It's like it's a massive thing out there, right? This is the reason why people jumped into crypto. This is the reason why people jump into NFTs, right? Because they're so desperate to make it. They're so like we're in this capitalist system where everybody has to differentiate themselves as an individual who's unique with a personality, and everybody's a unique snowflake in the world, in the words of Tyler Durden from Fight Club or whatever. That they people jump into these like risky things in order to hopefully make quick money because they measure success in mere capitalist, materialist, debased standards, essentially, or whatnot. Um, so even though I'm talking about Andrew, you're noticing I'm kind of making like more general commentary about society as is, because Andrew, as myself, we're people living in a society, and this Andrew, and like I said, none of this is scripted that I'm saying. I'm just free flowing right now, right? So another thing, right, about Andrew is that Andrew, if you notice, he talks about patriotism a lot. He likes to talk about like America and this or that, right? And he has this idealistic sense that, like, for example, if like just if aliens attack Earth or something, we're all just going to be united. Or he's even said stuff like I've heard in podcasts, and it's hard to get the exact timestamps in these long form podcasts because they just talk for hours. But Andrew Schulz, I remember literally almost kind of advocating that if we were in war, we would just naturally be united, right? So, and I used to think that when I was a kid. I grew up in the military. I believe his dad was in the military, but I'm not sure if he's, I hate to say it, a quintessential military brat. I'm a military brat. I was dragged from place to place, lived on bases, etc. Right? I'm a quintessential Cold War era born through the 90s, early 2000s military kid, born on a base, educated on base, ate on bases, slept on bases, PX, BX, Class 6. I know, I know. I also served in the military. I'm no Rambo. I'm not saying I'm a Rambo. I'm not saying I'm more patriotic than somebody because I did serve, because I think everybody can contribute to society in a different way. However, I used to have that kind of, I hate to say it, 1997 Starship Troopers movie by Robert Heinlein mentality that if like the military in this weird sense is going to be the glue or something for the patriotism to unite us or whatnot, right? And to a certain extent, there's truth to that. But then again, it's also we're saying we need conflict to unite, and it's just it's a very just interesting way about trying to advocate for unity. And but I see the point of what he's trying to say is that let's get over our differences and let's just try to unite because we are Americans. We live in a great country. Very noble stuff, right? But then again, that mentality can negate or even just totally help people continue in their dismissiveness of actual structural problems in our society, right? In other words, he's almost kind of advocating that we just need an opiate for the masses. And the opiate is his idea of patriotism, even though BlackRock, Vanguard Group, the Carlyle Group, and every other private equity firm are the reasons why everybody's prices are going up. Is the reason why they're forcing people, to spend less time with their families at home and go back to the office to go sit under unnatural fluorescent lighting for 10 hours a day and then spend 4 hours in their car and then not have time with their kids and their spouse. Because the truth is, all those private equity firms also are some of the largest real estate investors in America. You know what I'm saying? Like, like these noble ideas, that's awesome. These like objective, like we need to unite under patriotism, can obfuscate from what's actually happening to a certain extent. And that's another thing that's going to bleed into my next kind of analysis of Schultz, or at least some of the ideas that Schultz seems to perpetuate without even understanding sometimes that he's doing that. And Andrew Schultz is a classical liberal. I think that's the reason why he's in comedy without even realizing that, right? And I say that because Andrew Schultz has kind of he's taken it on to be the one man self-ascribed warrior for free speech. And don't you notice that about a lot of these comedians? They're always saying that I'm fighting for free speech. That's why we need to be provocative, right? We need to push the limits and always push the limits, because if we don't push the limits, we lose our freedom, right? So, and it's the exact same thing when it comes to guns, right? We don't need assault firing weapons and everything like that, because the moment that you start banning or modifying clip sizes and wait times and all this type of stuff is the moment that the government's going to take all guns, right? Or yada yada, right? It's almost kind of the thing about comedians is like some of them, not all of them, take on this kind of mission on their own volition to just preserve free speech, but they do it in this comedic way that is kind of there to just push the limits of what's acceptable. But what's acceptable is ultimately always going to be a subjective thing. Like comedians are never actually speaking the objective truth. They think they are, just because maybe they get a lot of feedback through laughs or giggles that it must be true. But then again, just like the ideas in your head are still gonna be kind of subjective, really. You know what I'm saying? And just because you're getting feedback through laughter doesn't mean all that feedback is coming from the same place. Sometimes people just don't know what you're saying and how to respond to it, so they're laughing. Sometimes people are just laughing because they're following the crowd and laughing. Sometimes people are laughing because they actually understand what it is you're saying. Sometimes people are laughing because they think it's so ridiculous what you said, they're just going to laugh anyway. You know what I'm saying? So, like, are comedians actual truth tellers, or are they just people who are talking, eliciting, or in getting responses? But we perceive it as they're telling they're getting truths, or they're speaking the truths, just because we misconstrue all that laughter as you know instant validation for whatever it is they're saying. And this is just the philosophy of comedy. Like, it seems it's not a science. You can't really treat comedy like a science. And I think that another thing about Schultz I noticed is that he wants to treat it like a science. It's like the sweet science of boxing, because he's a boxing fan. I noticed that too when I kind of, he talks about boxing a lot, right? It's about steps and procedures and routines and all this type of stuff, right? But the thing is, if you approach comedy in a very technical sense, it can almost be kind of cheesy to a certain extent. It's no different than having like a puppeteer person on stage or something. Like, it's almost kind of campy to a certain extent. And additionally, the thing about Andrew is that because he has these long form sessions in which he's constantly basically opening up his brain and thinking out loud, is that we know how his thought process works. So it's hard to kind of like necessarily laugh spontaneously when we already know how your thought process works. In other words, he's trying to kill two birds with one stone. He's trying to have maybe, another stream of income through the podcasting to hedge the comedy acting sort of aspirations that he has. Even though he's doing very well with the comedy, right? He's been sold out in arenas, yada yada. But let's just be real. He's diversified the portfolio of his life. And the stand up comedy and touring is just an element of it that's supplemented by the podcast thing. But when you do the podcast thing, is you lose the mystique because now we know how you think in these long form discussions, right? And sometimes we see things that we don't like. And so when you're up there on stage or whatever, and we bared witness to all your whoa, okay moments and everything like that, and you come up the stage with a joke to try to elicit that same response in us, we already know that's your intent. So it's like, what's the point? I feel like some of the best comedians are almost those that are kind of aloof, almost. You know what I'm saying? Like, say like for example, a comedian, and I'm not a stand-up comedian person. Really, I don't really understand or like sitting in a place and just hearing a person tell jokes. I like funny movies. I like funny people. I like joking around with friends and stuff like that. But like to be in a place to go see a person on stage with a light on them, observational comedy, it's an acquired taste. And I don't think that a lot of people understand that, and a lot of comedians don't understand how people cannot be like that. It's just people are just different. But that's just what I noticed by Andrew is that a lot of these people, they do these long form discussions, and it's like you've kind of already revealed, you've psychoanalyzed yourself, that your psychoanalysis of everything else kind of loses value at a certain moment in time. And if I had to compare this to another comedian, so like I said, I'm not a huge comedian person, but like Dave Attell, I believe is his name, very funny guy and everything, but he looks like a dude who's just smoking a cigarette, drinking coffee, reading a newspaper, who probably slept in, and is just angry that like his favorite bagel got sold out because he showed up too late because that's his own fault or something, and he's going to spend the next 30 minutes on a subway ride having existential epiphanies about how he continually messes up his life and his own happiness because he slept in and he didn't get his favorite bagel or something, right? And it's totally anecdotal and it's totally random, and but it works. And Dave Attell had a TV show. I remember early 2000s, it was one of the better Comedy Central shows, right? Like Late Night or something, or Up Late or whatever with Dave Attell. And it wasn't a podcast. It was just him out and about, just kind of experiencing a city, basically, when he was doing his touring. And it felt so organic and personal, but also distant. Like I didn't necessarily feel like I knew him 100% of the way. But then again, he was such a personable person that I didn't need to listen to him talk for 3 hours to get to know him. It just naturally oozes from him that he's a very genuine, interesting person. And and that's the thing. It's about podcasters, which you could beg the question: are podcasters really all that interesting people, or are they just people who just get up there, say things, knowing that other people have to actually, I hate to say it, work, and we're just filling the void listening to these people. And because they're getting so much attention, the algorithm naturally rewards them, even though it's not the same reward system that naturally occurred before, let's just say, the Google algorithm existed, right? Like when you wanted to go give attention to somebody, you had to go out of your way to give them attention or something. It wasn't naturally just gifted to that person just for kind of just almost being like an interactive billboard in which you just kind of stare at in traffic as you kind of like pump your brakes or something. But whatever. But anyways, to my point about classical liberalism, philosophically speaking, I think that Schultz is that. He's kind of like I think he sees himself as like a revolutionary in the Enlightenment sense of the word, of a classical liberal who's preserving free speech. But the only thing is that like nobody told you to do that. And it's great that you're trying to do it, but then again, if you're constantly trying to insert and put your foot down and win arguments and have the last say or something, do you really care about democracy? Do you really care about what everybody else thinks? Or is this really you testing your own consciousness at the expense of everybody else and you needing validation when you get up on stage and get those laughs? Like, is it like is it really a noble mission in helping humanity, or is this really a noble mission in Andrew Schulz helping himself? And it's just kind of like, and it just seems interesting. I feel like Andrew Schulz is a person who always wanted to be famous and was going to get famous by any means necessary, and comedy was just an avenue. If comedy weren't an avenue for him, I imagine Andrew Schulz, the way how he looks, as some kind of white, ethnically ambiguous person from New York, maybe a little Italian, maybe a little Jew, maybe a little wasp, maybe a little whatever. You know what I'm saying? He looks like he probably would have been on the ground floor of the New York Stock Exchange in a baby blue jacket, yelling at people with sales slips. Is kind of what Andrew Schulz kind of reminds. He would have been that. He would have been that ethnically ambiguous white person from wherever borough who was just driving into the city to make enough money, but then go chill with the boys and everything like that, after work or something on a few beers, right? Trying to afford that, nice house or something, hopefully on a waterfront in Queens or Long Island. But whatever. But anyways, it's like it's just interesting, and yeah, so like summary of kind of the stuff I'm kind of flowing with, it's like he's like this started from the bottom, now we're here, entourage type thing. But I think that Andrew, in a sense, also is probably more self conscious than what he gives off to a certain extent. And I get it. A lot of people who are attracted to the spotlight, media, sports, or whatever, there is that sense of self consciousness, right? And you hear a lot of these guys even talk about that in their own podcast. How they'll talk about Jordan, how Jordan was a psychopath, really, and that's the reason why he got so successful. So in a weird way, what are they really saying? How can I be a better psychopath and I can reach that level too? And it's just like, and it's just something very interesting about it. And they're revealing all of this through their podcasting, because and you can, like I said, you can almost profile these people because, and there's hours and hours of research and data. It's almost kind of like they're giving us an insight into what they would be saying to their psychologist, their psychiatrist, or something. But then sometimes have the audacity to go say, "You ain't anything because you don't have as much money as me." When we're the ones who've kind of preserved our, I hate to say it, integrity by not necessarily spilling our guts online all day. And not and the irony is they don't even understand that's what they're doing. That's the insane, like the sheer lack of awareness of many people in the podcasting space is a study in and of itself, because they think they're so aware of everything else around them, even though in many ways they're not even aware of themselves. They're not even aware of their nervous ticks when in their anger and frustration that you can see when they lose an argument, or they're told, or they're spoken over when they speak over people constantly. You can see it. It almost oozes out of the screen or something with people like Schultz and some of these other people. But like I said, I don't hate Schultz at all, like, or anything like that. He just reminds me of the homies I used to chill with when I was younger before I moved on with my life. He reminds me of, it's been a long week or whatever like that. Maybe I'm young and single or something. He's one of the hype men, one of the fellas who you cruise into the city for to go have a good time or something like that. And it's just another dude movie. It's just like the fella's trying to hit on a girl and you might get turned down or something or whatever, and like nobody really gets anything at the end of the night besides the one person who always does get lucky or something. But then at the end of the night, it becomes just another night for the fellas just to drink some beers and have an existential awakening or gathering talking about the deeper meanings of life. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's what so when I'm giving this commentary, it makes sense to me because that's exactly who I see Andrew Schulz being as a person or a character, with us particularly being of the same generation, of the same era, right? But the thing also about Andrew Schulz is it's kind of like I'm noticing that he's becoming more right wing, right? But the thing too is the reason why he's becoming more right wing is not because necessarily the ideas of right wing conservatism make sense. I think it's almost the same thing that happened to Joe Rogan. He's just getting validation from there without even understanding that's what's happening because he would never admit that he needs validation. I think like in a weird conscious associative state is like he does not even understand he needs validation, but he kind of wants validation. And if and he also wants simplicity. He wants simplicity in love. And if one side seems that it's disorder and criticism, you're just going to naturally gravitate towards the side that would make you just feel better, even if they are inherently the reason why the people on the other side are as pissed off in the first place. You know what I'm saying? It's and that's the difference between I would say a Bill Barr and like a Joe Rogan or Andrew Schulz. Bill Barr understands the frustrations of let's just say the left. And instead of throwing them under the bus and all this and gaslighting them basically, like maybe you're the problem or something, he's held firm and says, no, that the man is the problem. They're always going to be the problem. They've always been the problem. I'm not going to make excuses for them or anything like that. So I'm going to stay firm where I am. And in a weird way, that authenticity is the reason why I think people just like Bill Barr or Bill Burr, right? Um, it's just it's just because of his just stance to just be unwavering in his support for progressive causes. And he doesn't tolerate this nonsense of false equivalencies as if the right wing and the left wing are the same. They're not the same. Who are advocating for inclusiveness and acceptance, and who are the other ones standing for hierarchies and the status quo? There's only two sides to this, and they're not equal sides in value. And and I feel like even though like people on the conservative side, they may have good intentions, their feelings are in the right place. You know, it's one of those things where it's like if you're still supporting people like Trump, the same people, it's just like, well, I'm tired of this, I'm tired of that, I'm voting for Trump or whatever. Now we're literally living in a world where we're debating whether or not Elon Musk did the Heil Hitler sign, even though we kind of know that's what he did. We're living in a world now where people told us to don't go crazy about Donald Trump or whatnot. But his first day in office, he's basically saying, I want to basically shut down the government. You know what I'm saying? Like it's wild. It's I just in but regardless of me going too much off on the politics stuff, right? It seems like but no. Andrew brought this up. Andrew said comments talking about how real men basically cannot be Democrats, right? And a part of that was just his edge lord snarkiness, right? He's probably felt aggrieved by somebody, read a comment, got pissed off or whatever. How we all do when we wake up in the morning. You write something in the ambiguous ether of the internet, and then somebody responds to it, and then you wake up and you may start your day off pissed or something like that. You need that engagement with your own thoughts. And sometimes we almost use social media as a way to engage with our own thoughts passively and aggressively through strangers basically. That's why people comment on things, right? Like, do you think they're really commenting because they're really interested in an engaging conversation with a perfect stranger? No, we're all throwing out our ideas into the ether, mirror mirror on the wall type stuff, hoping to get an answer back. because that answer ultimately might tell us something more about ourselves than what we can figure out if we were just stuck with our own thoughts and our own brain, right? And and I think that Andrew's a total consequence of that too. But anyways, he made this comment talking about how this he made this comment just talking about how like Democrats can't vote for can't be men, right? And these are the same talking points that weirdos like Jesse Waters says on Fox News. The same Fox News anchor who not only cheated on his first wife with a little secretary, right? Trying to be Mr. Cool Madman, right? He also deflated the tires of his current wife as a means of her being helpless so he could go help her, right? Totally weird type stuff, right? That if most women would have figured out that you did that, the restraining order would have came in a heartbeat. You know what I'm saying? Um, you would have woke up with a restraining order just on your body. Like you wouldn't even realize how it got there. Um, but these are like Fox News talking points. In other words, conservatism and Republicans realized that they were losing the analysis debate. They were being exposed. People were looking into toxic masculinity, which is something that exists. Doesn't mean that masculinity is toxic, but there could be negative toxic characteristics of masculinity. The people, progressives, I'm not even going to say the left, but progressives were analyzing these things. And the powers that be got nervous. So realizing that they just can't throw people in camps and get rid of them, throw them up against the wall and spray them down, what you have to do is you have to manipulate people and make them feel like they're punks. Like they're, let's just be real, bitches. To make them feel like they're sus. Call their masculinity into question to manipulate them into maintaining the status quo, which is so interesting because they're actually feeding into what the left has been saying about gender roles. Everything is that they're archetypes. That these are not archetypes, but these are basically is fashion. Really, these are ideas, constructs, things that don't naturally grow on trees. You know, saying that men need to wear pants and not have long hair isn't necessarily an innate male thing. That's a cultural thing based off of cultural standards that we so happen to live in right now with some of the smartest people, allegedly, according ironically to all these right wingers and classical liberals and theocratic bros or whatever, some of the smartest men on earth didn't even wear pants. They all wore togas, they all wore dresses. And they were probably doing some weird, freaky, ambiguous stuff behind closed doors. So it's just kind of interesting that when Andrew, when push to shove, maybe getting some criticism, your response is the middle school "you're gay" thing. That's literally what Republicans have stooped to because all the analysis elsewhere they've kind of failed at. And don't you notice that, like, as a side tangent to Andrew about conservatism, is that the only thing really propping up conservatism still is fear and conspiracy theories. Everything's a damn conspiracy theory to the right. When wildfires happen in Southern California, it can't be because capitalism, and it can't be because of false rewiring, because of a mega corporation not having better quality control or trying to find the cheapest copper for their wires or whatever that probably sparked a fire. No, 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 no. According to conservatives and the conspiracy theory bros and the comedians who are all a part of this big right wing echo chamber online, no, 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 it has to be the fault of George Soros paying homeless people with butane lighters to go burn stuff or whatever, and we got the footage or whatever. Even though there's coming out with footage of no, these were actually sparks from electrical power cords and stuff of that nature. Like everything's a conspiracy. I think that is almost kind of like after the this is me just talking, but after the Cold War happened, after the Berlin Wall fell, and capitalism had no other enemy, no other dialectic, even though that's kind of a corny word that's been overused a lot or whatever, a binary opposite to fight against. Capitalism realizes that people really only believed in it out of fear of the other. So really, The thing about it is that since capitalism has run out of an enemy, it has to constantly create conspiracy theory. The conspiracy theory is the wackier the conspiracy theory and the more people believe it, to me is endemic of late stage capitalism. Is essentially is the it's almost like the more crazy the conspiracy and the more people believe it is almost proportional to the more concentration of wealth in an economy, because the people at the top need people to have all these conspiracies to basically just be peasants. It's almost like we've almost seen the rebirth of medieval, I call it medieval peasant brain. Demons, ghosts, spooky stuff, all this type of stuff, right? It all has to be from some metaphysical source now, right? Because, but we can't blame a CEO for raising your food. It has to be now because of demons. The world is going bad because of these weird, esoteric, zodiac symbol, Masonic, Illuminous, whatever, yada, 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 when we just can't point to the fact that, like, no, there's just a corporate board of really greedy people. In honestly, they didn't create the system. They're just hate the player. I mean, hate the game, not the player. And they just need to constantly get profits in order to basically, that's their job. Like, in other words, their job is to continue making the pie graph go, the line graph, the line chart go up or whatever. So how do they do that? They do stock buybacks, they do cuts, they raise prices, but they also got to pay people and influence through their politicians and their ground minions to create enough confusion that we don't see that that's what's happening, and then in the wake of our own misery that they're creating, they also provide these metaphysical opiates to in fear of ghosts and stuff like that. It's like we're literally living in a reversion back to the Middle Ages, but we just have technology now, and the new kings are just the capitalists and the tech bros, right? It's like capitalism. You can almost say, yes, is it the best system we've had? To a certain extent, sure, why not? It's been very effective, it's been very efficient. But the thing about capitalism is that it's no different in its idealism than communism. In theory, capitalism should have already erased a lot of stuff. There's no reason why we should be working 40 hours a week, right? Moore's law, right? So you're telling me that computer data and computer processing power through Moore's law, it has been exponentially doubling since whenever, since vacuum tubes till now, from vacuum tubes to nano chips, but we're still locked into a 40-hour work week? Doesn't make any sense, because it's not supposed to make sense. Is because capitalism is not the idealistic system that we've been told. It's really a game of winners and losers, but it's already been won. It's already been won to a certain extent. Sure, people may die and people may replace those who die or whatever like that. But the truth is that why would the capitalist really want to bring on a utopian state when he needs us trapped in the current monopoly game to continue bolstering his own profits and also keep us in a reality which still values that person as the top dog? Nobody's going to voluntarily give that up. You know what I'm saying? There, and even if beyond the current state of capitalism that we're at, there's a better one. They don't want to go to that better one. And it's interesting that you have these libertarians and anarchists or whatever arguing that, see, what I agree with you. We need to get to the better one. It's already unlocked. There's nothing you can do. Like, they're smart. They're smart enough to already understand that they've totally co-opted your libertarian movement and everything, and they know exactly what to do to anger you, so you end up just defending their own system. It's already on lock. Like, there's nothing really anybody else can do to a certain extent. Um, but that's just more random side tangents. But when Andrew, so, and some other things too about Andrew. So here we go, right? He got it. This is another thing too, right? And I'm just gonna explain to you, and you're gonna notice a lot of what I'm talking about through this conversation. So he got into an argument with Akash Singh, right, or a friendly debate, and Andrew's kind of arguing for nationalism here. And I don't know if he's been too inspired by the whole Elon thing, because I seem like Andrew's the type of person where it's kind of like you don't want to, you need to surround yourself by successful people to constantly to be successful yourself, which is very healthy advice. But there's an underlying bad thing, though. There's something underlyingly flawed with that thought is because not all successful people are good people. Like success doesn't equal morality. Money doesn't equal like likability. And so just because Elon Musk has positioned himself into a position of money doesn't mean that he's a good person by any means of the imagination. He's just gamed the system enough to be that person, to be who he is today. But anyways, I think Andrew's been kind of absorbing a lot of these Rogan-esque, Elon-esque type talking points or whatever, just because he sees that as the top dogs, right? And like the manosphere, who has this very oversimplified view of alphas and betas or whatever, I think that also Andrew Schulz falls victim to that mentality too, to a certain extent. Like, in other words, it's all very animalistic dominance. There's doms and there's subs. Like that's how the world works or something like that. And I think a lot of people understand that the world is just a nuanced thing. And don't get me wrong, like Andrew is definitely a smart person in everything, very, very smart person in everything. He understands everything I'm saying. I just think that maybe he's becoming a little dissociated just because of the fame he's obtained. Like he chose this path and he's kind of going through his Dorian Gray phase or whatever, where like the fame and the love and the beauty is kind of to a certain extent, if he's not careful, could actually turn him into one of these just another right wing troll if he's not careful with it. And I'm saying this as a person who doesn't dislike Andrew. But let's watch this debate and I'm going to do some in and out commentary.
I don't know if you believe that. Because if all of a sudden, again, white people started moving to India and changing what Indian culture is. Like, you've already complained about Indian culture becoming too westernized.
Yeah, but that's, again,
and Japanese people started coming and then making it a little more Japanese. Like,
I'm going to cut you off because India got imperialized, got conquered. India was supposed to have an entirely different trajectory. It got robbed, pillaged, raped, fucked. Now I have a sensitivity to it. England didn't get imperialized, robbed, pillaged, raped, fucked by any of these foreigners for sure coming in. No Indian country.
That's not true, but
You're bringing in Indians when you have the British Empire for sure.
But I mean, like, of course, the Roman Empire conquered them. I mean,
not by the people that you don't like. He doesn't have a problem with Italians coming over.
No, he does.
He has a problem with Italians.
Yeah. So
you think those guys that are rioting?
He's saying each country, like if Italians came and made England Italian, he has an issue with it. He doesn't like the no border policy. He doesn't. So he's like, every country that fought for their identity should be able to uphold that identity.
The people he's defending, they don't have a problem with Italians. The people he's saying, I understand where they're coming from and sympathizing with.
But I'm not going to argue on them.
But that's who he's supporting, defending.
Sure. What I'm just saying, I hear what you're saying. But his argument about a nation being able to fight for its identity, and if it doesn't, by not accepting large amounts of immigrants, they're looked at as racist. I don't know if they should be looked at as racist. If the idea of fighting that war was to preserve the English identity, and accepting large groups of people from other countries is naturally going to chip away at that singular identity. I understand the logic behind it.
That could be one of the many emotions, but I do think there's some racism involved in the same way that, like, they're not going to be upset at the Italian restaurant opening up in their neighborhood.
You've made that argument. I'm not saying that. I'm making.
And this is just to what I'm saying earlier. That's a great premise. I can't find a ton of holes in it. A comedian has a great premise. You can't just find the holes in it.
Right.
It's fun. But we both know at the end of the day, this is not like a real thing this person believes, or you should know.
See, I don't like getting into those arguments where it's like we're gonna assume what they really mean. Like I'm just trying to have the argument based on like the words that are said, which is does Hawaii have the ability to maintain their Hawaiian culture?
Okay, it's just kind of interesting. He says he's just gonna analyze it off the words they say, but when Andrew says words that are totally controversial and piss people off or something, it's like I'm trying to understand that a little bit. It's like it's almost like he's trying to understand the words of this guy, I guess, advocating for nationalism because maybe he's sympathetic to nationalism, but people shouldn't analyze the words he says or take them too seriously because he's a comedian or something like or whatnot. So in other words, we're shifting our framework based off a situation, and it's not necessarily always a consistent thing in how you interpret language and reality and what people are saying. Like is what it comes down to. And if I'm making that correctly, maybe I'm not saying it the best way, but it's like he's literally saying like don't assume what that guy's saying. Just that's what he said. Don't read into it any less or more of it or whatnot. But when you say something like a joke or something, you're saying that we're supposed to kind of like if like for example, if you say that you're going to essay Kendrick Lamar, we're not supposed to believe that's what you're really saying. We're supposed to say that, oh, we get it as a joke, you mean something totally different or something. So it seems like a different framework and a different standard or something like that. I don't know, but let's keep playing.
And when Western culture starts to come in, or even Japanese culture, where these other cultures start to chip away at the Hawaiian identity, do they have the right to be frustrated with that, or are they racist when they're frustrated?
Yeah, but again, you're talking about a colonized place that was in.
So this is something very interesting. So the conversation that they're having, right, is Andrew's basically arguing that people should be able to just be happy and defend like their country and all that type of stuff, right? And they shouldn't be called racist, right? And I guess the difference is that can culture exist without race? That's a big thing, right? Because the Akash's point, he's basically kind of saying is like let's say a Nigel Farage or somebody from Britain, right? And they're saying like we got to keep Britain British, right? They're really probably not that angry that the white Italians there. You know what I'm saying? They're really saying is our country's becoming too brown, our country's becoming too Muslim or too Hindu, right? You know, in other words, can race and culture be separate? I think they can. And a lot of the people who are arguing for these blood and soil nationalistic things don't want the race and the culture to be separate. They don't want, put it this way, even if you were an Indian person, right? And let's say you moved to Poland, and let's say you don't know a single word of any sort of Indian language, you converted to Roman Catholicism, you know, let's just say your family even changes their last name to a Polish last name. You ontologically in your brain, mentally speaking, let's just say your existence is Polish, right? The sad truth is that people will not see that person as Polish. Some people will, a lot of people won't. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of and that's the thing. I don't think that Andrew is like acknowledging is like he's making it sound that people are just trying to protect this sort of like a fashion, a style, aesthetics, right? But so many of these people they don't separate the race from the culture. You know what I'm saying? So and it's one of those things, and it is kind of racist that some of these nationalist groups are. I mean, many of these nationalist groups espouse racist ideas. You know what I'm saying? It's like you know, like to the Hawaiian thing too. It's like okay, you have Hawaiians there, and let's say you're a white kid, right? And you were raised in the big island of Hawaii, and you speak with the Hawaiian kind of like accent and everything like that. You're one through. You eat all the foods and everything like that. You're one with the community or something. I don't know if a lot of people are going to consider you to be Hawaiian, but maybe after they get to know you, they will or something. I don't know. But the truth is that to Akash's point is that a lot of these other countries were kind of colonized and exploited. But when these people from these colonized and exploited countries show up in their countries, then all of a sudden it's a problem. Like it was totally okay to rob these countries of wealth and their art. There's still art in the British Museum that belongs in many countries that aren't English. Are the English giving back their art in their museums? That could be the first step in some reconciliation process, but they're not going to do it because it's not necessarily about this false notion of like equality that these nationalists are trying to espouse that they're being. They're making these nationalists are making it sound like no, actually, we're just like the left. We actually promote diversity. We don't, and that's why we don't need other people of different colors in our country because we're trying to preserve diversity, right? They're kind of using the leftist language of self-determinism and everything to advocate for their very racial hierarchist viewpoint or whatnot. And even if it's not, and also not only that racial hierarchist viewpoint, the economic exploitation systems that bolsters that mindset, right? Because Europe wouldn't be what Europe is if Africa weren't poor. The United States wouldn't be what it is today if Latin America weren't poor. Like so, there is you can't necessarily make an apples to apples comparison between like Hawaii and let's just say Great Britain because Hawaii was colonized by those people and everything like that, forced under their thumb under those people. But the people moving, let's just say Hawaiians moving to England or something like that, aren't necessarily going over there to necessarily like oppress English people. It's just a better place to live. And in many cases, these people can assimilate into what it means to be British. If Britishness is an idea and not simply a race. And I think that the one thing I'm hearing in this conversation between Andrew is like he's almost doing PR for these racial nativist groups without understanding that's what he's doing because those groups don't separate race from culture. You know what I'm saying? Andrew's over here arguing as if, like I said, he's arguing for the preservation of style, fashion, accents, food, or something like that. No, no, no. These people are advocating for the preservation of a racial look, is what it comes down to. Because, like I said, you can be an African, and let's just say you grew up around no other Africans in Germany. You speak fluent German better than many white people trying to learn German. You eat nothing but German food. You know what I'm saying? So does that not make you a German? What is a German? You can almost say the whole concept of a German is a new concept. Is a whole new concept. An Italian is kind of a new concept. These are the ideas of nationalism because of the Treaty of Westphalia, right? These are new concepts because back in the day, you can almost say you had Bavarians. Bavarians are still trying to break away from Germany. You have Bavarians, you have Saxons, you have Thuringians, you have Swabians, you have Prussians, you have different groups. You have Lombards, you have the Napoles, you got Sicilians. You have all these different people who are kind of like forced underneath the notion of this kind of nation state and everything like that, right? So what I'm trying to say is everything naturally evolves over time anyway. What is a British person? A British person, there used to be nothing really called a British person at one point in time. You had Saxons, Jutes, Picts, Angles, some Norse in there, some Romans in there. In the Romans, they had a multicultural empire. Some of the soldiers stationed in Rome in Londinium before it became London very well could have been from Africa, some of them. Some of them could have been from Syria. Some of them could have been from Bulgaria. You know what I'm saying? It's like the world is constantly a fluid thing that's constantly evolving and changing or whatnot. And but what is the whole notion of conservatism? To not change. And I guess the thing is that, for put it this way, if people are coming to your country to totally replace the culture, that's different than having racial diversity. These people don't want racial diversity and they don't want a different culture because they don't separate race from the culture. But I'm saying that you actually can separate race from the culture, and the race actually shouldn't really matter all that much. But these people, a lot of these groups, are inherently racist. They just know they can't be racist publicly. So when you're defending these people, Andrew, or everything like that, you're actually doing the PR top cover obfuscation for them without realizing that's what you're actually doing.
Like that's where the difference is.
Okay.
It just is
Remove
different.
colonization. Like,
but
we're
you
do a thought
cannot.
experiment. Just do a thought experiment.
Hey, yeah, as a thought experiment, if they had never been colonized, don't worry about it.
Everybody's been colonized, so that cancels out everybody.
I mean, they're still colonized, like right now.
Okay. Okay. This is why these things are so difficult. It's really hard to just even hypothetically discuss it.
Moving in, I would honestly be like, hey, this just country changes. Like Mexico has been its own country for a long time. Country changes. It's not Indians moving into England where it's like, well, we have to come here because you actively took all of our jewels. They're still in your fucking palace. So I have more opportunity here. I'm coming.
You think those jewels are doing anything?
India was a wealthy...
Jewels are going to help 2 billion. I hate this revisionist history where India was wealthy and then now all of a sudden they're broke.
Yeah, how is that now all of a sudden? Like, what are you even talking about?
I mean, look at Africa. Like, they took all their resources and Africa's still a poor country, continent.
And I mean, like, I just know that you don't have anything to substantiate that. So it's like, there's no way to... We're living in like a world where like there's no way to prove the trajectory would have gone completely positive. There could have been infighting
I don't know
and
if it would have
war.
been positive. I don't know if it would have been completely positive. But it would have been, I said it was just completely different trajectory. I didn't say it was worse.
Right.
Completely different trajectory.
I guess
That they did not have control of.
In that situation with Mexico, like I would totally understand if Mexico was like, hey, I don't want you chipping away at our culture. Like,
I think that is happening a little bit. I think some Mexicans are mad at the like El Salvadorians like come up and like they take over like little enclaves or something. I was talking about a Mexican buddy. He's like, yeah, like there's like...
But that's just it, though. It seems like this whole conversation is they're kind of forgetting something. So he's saying like, yeah, I agree. Like Mexicans, like if other people come here or something, and they're angry about it. Maybe that's a them problem. You know what I'm saying? It's like, put it this way: what are they really doing to help those people feel to be more Mexican? You know what I'm saying? It's not necessarily, you know what I'm saying, what are people in Germany doing making people to feel more German or something like that? But it's not about that. It's about the maintaining of a look or whatnot. I think that's what's ultimately going on here is that there seems to be this distinction. They're not making a distinction between race and culture, but they think that these things are naturally like 100% intrinsic with each other. But then you start going down a dangerous path when you do that, because if culture is intrinsic to a person's race, you can say this is when you almost start getting into like, almost like pseudoscience to a certain extent. Like, oh, just, oh no, like you start almost getting into like subspeciation. Like, oh, these are just basically just different humans almost at a certain time because their behaviors are just totally different or whatever. And maybe we're actually not the same or whatnot. You know what I'm saying? Rather than culture just being fashion of the mind and of the flesh or something that's just accrued through time and space over hundreds, if not thousands of years. But then again, why not can another person of a different color adopt those ways? And that's kind of what America is. Like, America is a land of ideas. There's no such thing as a racial American or whatnot. Everybody came from somewhere else. You know what I'm saying? Maybe in a 5,000 years, under certain conditions, if America were totally isolated from everything else and everybody just had to breed with each other here, maybe there will be some unique genetic American whatever, and there will be a unique whatever American phenotype or something, but there's not. So that's what I'm saying is like, what is a nation when nations are technically new? And then also, can race be separate from culture? And I think they can. And if you don't make that distinction, I feel like these guys are kind of going in a circle in their conversation, because it's like, you're almost kind of arguing for, I hate to say it, kind of racial violence to a certain extent. Like, it's almost kind of okay to be angry that somebody who just looks different is in your community, even though that person who looks different, who wants to adopt your ways or something, never can truly can never 100% feel included or something. When I would make the argument that if you want your culture to exist, if you want your culture to really last, you spread that culture. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're speaking literally an Indo-European language right now. You know what I'm saying? Which it was because a certain group or type of peoples spread their language and everything like that. They didn't say that you had to be a certain color to speak our language. No, they just spread their language. It just spread over time, and we're still speaking it to this day. I would say that race, the body of the flesh, nobody knows what that's going to be in the future, but ideas of the mind, culture, that's totally different than of the race and of the body. But when you don't separate those two things, I think you play a dangerous game of actually promoting racial conflict, essentially. Because what you're really saying is, we as a people need to physically take out these other people in order to preserve our culture, because we can't make the distinction between the two.
They have like immigrants that are moving through and they get annoyed by it. I don't know if it's all Mexico. I doubt it.
And again, we're different in especially like New York, because this is part of our identity. We've had these different groups of people that we've fully embraced coming in here and becoming part of the fabric of what it is to be an American from the beginning. Even when we went west, there's Mexicans, there's Native Americans, there's always all these different people. Even when we're uniting the country, we were colonies of different countries, so there are different cultures for us to even handle. You go down to New Orleans and there's like French speakers. Like, there's just all this different stuff that we've had to deal with. So this is our idea of what a country is.
Some of these scoop the bagel ass people, like they.
That's me. I'm a scoop the bagel.
Get the fuck out.
That's racist.
Get those people out of there.
But so I do think we're projecting our idea of like acceptance on other countries that are just like, hey, listen, we've worked thousands of years to curate this identity, and we don't want to water that identity down. And the people that do come in here, and if they end up watering it down, it's not going to be something we like, and don't call us racist for that. You tell me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say a bunch of Chinese people started to move into Italy, and they started to, like, change what it is to be an Italian. Are they wrong? Are they racist for that?
I guess it depends, and that's just it. The thing, Andrew, is like you're saying is like all these Chinese people move in and start making it more Chinese or something. I mean, if you're talking about, it depends on what you're talking. Are you talking about the melting pot theory, or are you talking about multiculturalism or whatnot? Are you talking about even another position beyond those two positions? Because it's like, if you're talking about a melting pot, well, then the Chinese people would be just, trying to fit into Italian society. And if they're not, shamed for not looking like your stereotypical Italian, then whatever. You know what I'm saying? Whereas I think, but in an extreme multicultural sense, where you just have these little split off ethnic enclaves that don't really like talk to each other or something, then that could be an issue or whatnot. But it's like you're making it. He's making it sound, oh, these Chinese people start moving in, and then all of a sudden they start changing things. Wouldn't you be a little? I mean, that's a what if. I mean, that's just a hypothetical. I mean, what if their children who are born there, who go to Italian schools, want to fit into with their Italian friends, become naturally more Italian? You know what I'm saying? You make it sound like just he makes it sound like their very presence there naturally indicates a change in the negative that's against the host country. And that very seedling of thought is the bare basis of xenophobia. Like Andrew Schulz is kind of looking like Billy the Butcher from Gangs of New York a little bit, mustache and haircut and all, right? In other words, just them being there somehow, he seems to have this default position that things are going to change or whatever. That's no different than, like, I hate to say it, the black person moving into an Italian neighborhood or something like that or whatever. This whole notion of, they're just going to change it all or whatnot. But the reason why it actually changes, interestingly, is because of the host group's inability to accept that person. They isolate that person, actually. And then when more people come, they basically already created the aspect of a segregated society because they had no interest in ever wanting that person there to begin with, even if they were willing to accept their culture. But then he's going to argue, well, why do you have to give up your culture then? Maybe they don't want to give. They're not. It's not that they're like consciously giving it all up. I'm just saying they're doing more of a concerted effort to like fit in, and just naturally speaking, you would just assimilate, you acclimate to your climate. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like accent. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just how it is. It's like if you go to a place, like if I go around my southern family, I naturally kind of pick up my southern inflections because it just sounds right or whatnot. Culture is kind of the same. You kind of just pick it up, really. It becomes kind of like the easiest way to get things done, and it's not always a pathological thing. Sometimes it is a subconscious kind of thing you kind of just pick up. Um, so I don't really understand what he's saying. I mean, I see what he's saying, but the only way to understand Andrew and what he's saying here is by putting your foot down and defining exactly what his intention is. And his intention, it seems, is arguing for the preservation of nationalities. But to many people, that means the preservation of race. Because they're not separating race from their nationality in many of these blood and soil parties and stuff like that, right? And everything. So he's selling it and pitching it. It's like, see, my ideas are good. He's using hand motions. He seems a little confused, as if like, give me something here, right? Come on, like give me a little something here, right? And I think that other people are just like, like I guess that's your opinion or something. And sure, maybe Akash has his own predispositions and everything, that his own personal biases or whatnot too. Coming from a country like you said that was been colonized and everything like that, and they have a very strong culture, ancient culture, and everything. You know, but in myself being African American, like being African American, we literally had to start from zero. We basically crafted our own culture. There's no other really culture like it. It's not African. You know what I'm saying? And because of white supremacy, it never really fit in 100%. It didn't become white, your wasp. So it kind of parallel evolved alongside white supremacy to create this own thing, right? But it's still a construction of some sort, and a construction evolves and can always change. It's still, and that's why it's weird when people say, "Oh, you act white or you act black," because what are you even really saying? You know what I'm saying? It's like, we live in a world, interestingly, where some people, even on the left, some of these people on the left, in an annoying sense, like they'll be like gender is relative, but then all of a sudden, when it comes to race and nationality, they all of a sudden become like very objective in their truth speaking or whatnot. And it's just very interesting. Just a little side tangent when it comes to that. But but yeah, interestingly, yeah, it's just, yeah, I can just keep going, but whatever.
No, probably nationalist.
But is that wrong?
I mean, I guess it depends to what degree.
Oh, based on our perspective of a country, that's wrong. But we also don't have thousands of years of history and like identity built into that. Like I don't know, I would feel wrong. Like if I know that India's a.
He's saying we don't have thousands of years of history. Yes, as a thing with borders around it, but in a weird way, in a sense, like when you say America, people are talking about the West. Like America is just kind of an extension of that to a certain extent. Like we're just a new program upgrade of it. We're not the old world west, we're the new world west, you know, and we're literally and figuratively west of the old world and everything. So it's like as far as location. So it's like he's trying to make it sound like, or he's like trying so hard to defend this position or something, and it's kind of like, but to my point is, I hate to say it, Poland, for example, wasn't always Poland. It was the Polish Lithuanian whatever for a while, right? Like I said, when it came to England, England wasn't always England. It was Wessex, Suffolk, Northumbria, you know, all that type of stuff. When it comes to Germany, Germany was the Holy Roman Empire. It was a patchwork of different nationalities. Like if we had the same passport rules right now, you would literally, it would be a nightmare to have gone through Germany because of how many principalities, duches, margravets, etc. Right? The whole like it's just interesting that he's making it sound like they fought for this up to what point? You know, it's like it's to me it's always kind of a constant changing thing or whatnot. I mean, to me it's like if you like I said to my point earlier, if you want your culture to be preserved, the smarter thing is actually to share it with people, not to cast it out from people. You want people to be like, heck yeah, I'm a British person. Heck yeah, I'm a French person. Heck yeah, I'm a Polish person. If you try to make it into your little exclusive little club, what happens when people just don't give a shit about your little exclusive club? You know what I'm saying? They don't see value in it. You know what I'm saying? It's just like you're just over there. Fine, that's fine. You guys are all Polish and you're screwing your whatever fourth cousin or whatever. Don't mean anything to me because I have no vested interest in it or whatnot. So therefore, it's like, why would I need to trade with you? Why would I want to share my goods with you? Why would I want to do anything with you? Or anything like that? You're just over there or whatnot. It's just it seems very interesting, like what he's saying here.
Different example, but like I feel like, let's say we white people, just Europeans, started moving into China and slowly changing China and making China more white. Like I would, and they were like, "Hey, we don't like how China's becoming so like westernized. Like we're losing our cultural identity." I wouldn't be like, "You fucking racist! How dare you?" Like I'd be like, "Yeah, I get that. Like we're coming to your shit and then making your shit ours." We talk about this with gentrification all the time.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
Like when it comes to gentrification, we unanimously agree it's wrong. And then when it comes to the gentrification of a country,
we don't like.
So he's trying to compare it now to gentrification, but the thing about gentrification, even though the
Made to light up the room.
is agreeing with them or whatnot, is that gentrification is an economic issue first and foremost. But it just so happens to be so embedded with race because of the history of our unique country, because of the history of slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, Native American genocide, all white pro immigration policies, and all this type of stuff. So race and money are kind of intrinsic in our country, unfortunately. So, but however, you can have gentrification amongst the same racial groups. For example, look at Atlanta. A lot of black young professionals with money move to Atlanta, and they're not living out in the suburbs. They're moving to the west side of Atlanta. They're fixing up those houses and everything like that. And just because they're black doesn't mean they're poor. They have a higher income. So, but the poorer black people in the community might be feeling the effects of it or whatnot. And so it's just very interesting. And it's like, and it's just kind of interesting too how it seems Andrew's like natural like reflexive response about the whole China thing is that like if Americans were to go over there or something, how they just naturally will become more whiter, which is almost just kind of indicative of like what you're really saying is that American imperialism and white supremacy are kind of interlinked with each other, slightly speaking, in like white standards and all these type of things. But but he still fails to mention is that no, what if a bunch of Americans move to China and just wanted to actually fit in with Chinese culture. Does that mean anything? Like I said, there's a difference between culture and race. But it seems like maybe this is him just being from New York, and you live in these very ethnically segregated areas where you have white Italians, white Irish, black people over there, Cubans over here, Dominicans over there, and it seems like they function that way. That's not how other areas, even of America, see race or whatnot. Like for things to be that hyper ethnic is kind of strange, even for a person from the South. I'm sure it's even different for a person like Akash, who's from Texas or whatnot. But that's the world that he comes from. Andrew comes from. He comes from a world of, I hate to say it, ethnic and racial segregation. We just don't see it as that because we think that, oh, it's New York and they're a bunch of Yankees and they're supposed to be liberal and yada yada yada. When really northern cities are some of the most segregated places in America, more so than the American South, which gets all the heat for its history.
We don't like it, but we don't stop it.
Yeah, that's true. But it's oftentimes the people that there don't have the power to stop it. And if they maybe did have the power, they would do something. I guess like
I think it's like a power and affluence thing. Like, I think powerful countries that don't accept immigrants in large degrees are then seen as like xenophobic.
Yeah.
Whereas poor countries that don't accept them are seen as protectionist.
yes,
Like they seem like they're conserving their resources and like not just letting anyone in.
And maybe that's why Italy wouldn't bother me as much. Also, maybe just Italian culture is cooler to me or whatever. So the Italy thing, I'm like, I get it more for Italy than England. England, I also think if you have a problem with the people coming in, that's a little different than saying, hey, if you're going to come here, just assimilate. If you're going to come here, do our shit. I wouldn't love that, but I get it. Yeah. If you're going to move to my country, embrace our culture, this is what it is. If they're telling the people, come here and embrace what it is to be English. Muslims, stop doing that to women. That's fine. But when you have a problem with them coming in, it starts to feel different.
So here's the thing. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you say, hey, if you come here, you got to take on our traditions and customs, like France basically says, hey, you can't wear the hijab, you can't do that. Then all of a sudden you're like, well, you're not really a free country. These people can't even live free. Right? Like they're criticized all the time for the lack of freedom that they're giving Muslim women. I think they said they couldn't wear hijabs during the Olympics. Like, so they're restricting their freedom. They're basically saying you're free to be French. But then don't be not French about it. But then also they don't want to restrict their own citizens. So if you're a citizen of France, you have the freedom to reject French shit. But not if you're coming from the outside. I guess what I'm trying to say is,
this notion of a free country is very American.
Okay, that's fair.
Like I don't know if that's a part of the cultural identity of Western Europe.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I guess what I'm trying to say is, well, maybe liberté, égalité, like freedom is part of the liberté, égalité. What's the other thing?
This is the thing, and even like Mark brings up a great point, right? And it's like just because like two things seem the same, like France and the United States, we are fraternal cousins, right? You know what I'm saying? They helped us in the revolution, all that type of stuff. You know, Statue of Liberty is basically a French monument, these type of things. But we're totally different kind of societies in how we see that freedom. You know what I'm saying? Like, for example, we have, freedom of religion. They have freedom from religion over there, right? In other words, like they have a true secular state and everything like that. And it's so let me see here. So, and it also kind of looks like, actually, 1 minute. But it's just like, yeah, no, sorry, so I'm back now. But anyways, it's like, yeah, exactly. Like I think to Mark's point, it's like, yeah, their notion of freedom is kind of different than ours. We have notions of freedom, but they're different. They're not the same and everything like that. But then, and in a weird way, it's like now Andrew's trying to, in a weird way, apply an American standard of freedom to France when his whole notion is that they're supposed to be different. But I think he's more prone with trying to sound smart and win the argument here.
Fraternity.
Yeah, so like freedom is in the slogan for the country.
I just don't know if it's built into the cultural ethos the way it is in America.
Okay, fair. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like this is a very difficult conversation. Not difficult, maybe, but prickly conversation where every side has like decent justification, and I think all too often, because we don't want to have the conversation, we're like, you're a racist. Yeah, shut up, you're a racist. I don't know if that is. And I don't think I would call a country racist if I was the one coming into their country and trying to change.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, that was kind of interesting because he just needs to acknowledge and admit, unfortunately, that racism still exists. I think he's almost this whole notion of like kind of like in other words, we've lived in the post-racial society long enough that like all of a sudden these people who are saying something that is racist just isn't racist, just coming from the heart for them trying to preserve themselves. When really no, they've actually been a lot of these people have been actively encouraged and groomed by movements with explicit racist underpinnings to have those feelings and have those sentiments. They just know how to do it in a way that isn't overtly racist anymore or whatnot. And but to his point, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different opinions, and really the truth of how to really fix these situations of diversity, multiculturalism, nationalism, or whatever is going to be a nuanced approach or whatnot. But then again, for the nativists who are pushing back so much, you got to think to yourself is as a society, as the host country, you needed these people in many ways to come to your country. And that's what even, this is the thing that even Andrew's not even admitting. The country, even though they did not invite them with a please come here, they did kind of suck them over there because there was a demand for certain jobs that other people in those countries were not doing. British people wanted to move up the economic ladder. American people want to move up the economic ladder. Nobody is saying I want to be a generational janitor. Nobody's saying I want to be a generational person who cuts grass. I don't think that's a horrible thing. But the truth is, unfortunately, in our society, we do create this sort of caste system. And as the more Americans try to move up the economic ladder from poor to middle class, and some to upper middle class, and some to rich, you need people to fill the void. So it's one of those things. It's like, and this is the thing about northern hemisphere countries like Europe and the United States. They want their cake and they want to eat it too, as what's that the old adage goes. They want everybody to live these very prosperous suburban, sterile lives, but they don't want to see how the hamburger is made. They don't want to see how what's going on in the kitchen or anything like that, right? And it's an irony too, because not only did these immigrants need to be here to help facilitate the uplifting of your native population made them feel like shit when they came here, rather than saying, hey, this is a program that we can have as as the host country to show you that, you can be more like us or something. And we'll even take certain elements of what you have. In other words, multiculturalism may not work fine. But what does work is, I truly believe, is kind of a mixture of multiculturalism, but with a lot of the melting pot. But a lot of these nativist countries that Andrew seems to be defending don't even want the melting pot thing. They just want to be static in time, space, eternal, forever, to preserve an aesthetic. It's not about preserving the culture, the idea, the fashion. It's about preserving blood, is what it comes down to, or whatnot, which is in theory kind of a defiance of evolution and of itself and of change and of adaptation. Sure, you should be allowed to say that, we want to steer our destiny in this or that direction. Sure, to a certain extent, but then at the same time, if you're going to be honest, is that the people we all existing today would not be in existence if our ancestors were merely static in themselves. You make it sound like there was just people on a locked off island just forever, just constantly inbreeding with each other or something like that, and like that didn't cause a problem. They were always kind of taking in new people or kidnapping women from other tribes or doing whatever. You always had some sort of admixture happening on some level, sometimes larger than others, right? There was always some sort of mixing going on some way, somehow, somewhere. And and that's the thing about the world we live in is like if you want to preserve the idea of being Polish or German, there's nothing wrong with that. But why can't a person who just looks different than your stereotypical German, Polish, or English person be that? And the racists, they're trying to be snide, they're and kind of clever about it, when really their whole goal is just racial preservation. And if you don't admit that, you're just creating a top covered excuse for them. But honestly, I'll probably just end it right there. Really, I mean, there's more I could probably do, but whatever, who cares? But yeah, that's kind of my just analysis right now of Andrew Schulz and everything. So thank you, peace out, bye.